President Donald Trump is at his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey for the 4th of July weekend after another controversial week in Washington. In this case, related to his own vulgar tweets about a cable news host. Members of his own party said those comments were beneath the dignity of his office, and they've overshadowed a number of key issues, including health care. Republican senators have been unable to reach a compromise. So yesterday, the president tweeted out if Republican senators are unable to pass what they're working on now, they should immediately repeal and then replace at a later date. It echoes a letter sent to him from Republican Nebraska Senator Ben Sasse, which suggests the president call on Congress to first repeal as much of Obamacare as possible, then cancel the August recess to spend the time working on writing a new health care reform plan. Alex Conant is CBSN political contributor and a former communications director for Senator Marco Rubio. Okay, Alex, so far Republican leaders, they've been trying to repeal and replace at the very same time. They haven't gone the route of repealing first and then replacing. Why?
Well, because politically that is impossible. There's just not enough support to flat out repeal Obamacare, which is why from the very first moments where Republicans have been fighting Obamacare, they've been talking about repeal and replace. Nobody wants to go back to the old system. So if you say all you're going to do is repeal Obamacare, you're essentially saying you're going back to the old system, which is why the replacement component is so critical and why Republicans have always said that they were going to do both at the same time. We're going to repeal Obamacare and replace it with something that's better. Now, obviously, they don't have the political support right now to pass McConnell's bill, and so they're tinkering with that, trying to see if there's a way they can get 51 votes in favor of that. If they don't get 51 votes in favor of that, let's be real, they are not going to have 51 votes to straight up repeal Obamacare without a plan ready to go.
So some Republicans, we're hearing, Alex, are suggesting working with Democrats to actually fix health care. Do you think that would be easier than repealing Obamacare first?
I mean, nothing is easy when it comes to healthcare. It's a complicated topic, and the politics of it are really, really tough. And the idea that you're going to have some big sort of bipartisan kumbaya moment where everyone agrees on what healthcare should look like in America in the 21st century, I think that's rather far-fetched. The fact of the matter is that there just is not bipartisan consensus in Washington, D.C. about what America's healthcare system should look like. So if we don't repeal and replace Obamacare this summer, as Mitch McConnell is aiming to do, the prospects of then coming together with Democrats in the fall, when Democrats are already going to be looking at the midterms, I think that is a very far-fetched scenario. So
bipartisanship on health care, you say, is pie in the sky then, huh?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, look, bipartisanship on anything in Washington, D.C. right now, I think is pie in the sky. There's just not a lot of consensus, in part because Donald Trump is such a polarizing leader for the Republican Party.
So we know Republicans have left, Republicans and Democrats have left for research. What do you, recess, what do you believe they'll hear from their constituents when they go home? And do you find, Alex, that it makes a difference when they go back to their home states and hear from the folks they represent?
Absolutely, it makes a difference. Yeah, I've worked for several members of Congress, and I can tell you when they go back and hear firsthand from the constituents, it's a lot different than when they just get phone calls in their offices or read their emails or see posts on Facebook. You know, hearing face-to-face from constituents where you can really see the emotion, hear the arguments in depth, it really does make a big difference. And so I think that's why Mitch McConnell really wanted to get health care done before the July 4th recess, because the polling that came out this week shows there's very little political support for his health care plan. So when members go home over the 4th now, it's unlikely that it's going to pick up any additional support because they're just not going to be hearing from constituents who like what Mitch McConnell has proposed so far.
So meanwhile, I want to ask you about the president's voter fraud commission. They're asking states to hand over election data, despite the fact there was no evidence showing there was any sort of widespread fraud during the last election. At least 20 states are pushing back, Alex. And some of those states include Republicans leaders. What are the serious concerns here about actually sharing this data?
You know, this is an interesting issue because you have some Democrats who I think are just sort of playing politics with it. They don't want to give the data to Trump's commission because it's bad home state politics for them, because they're Democrats. And then, as you said, there are some Republicans who are not giving the data to Trump's commission because it's illegal in their states. So this seems likely to be something that ends up ultimately in court, whether or not the federal government can force the states to hand over this data. At the end of the day, the real question here is, was there fraud in the 2016 election? Was there massive voter fraud, as President Trump has alleged? Let's be clear. There is no evidence that there was any massive voter fraud in the 2016 election. If this commission can get the data and reassure Americans that there was no massive voter fraud, I think that's great. But that is a pretty big if at this time, given the makeup of the commission, lots of Trump supporters on it, and then the legal realities surrounding accessing sufficient amounts of data to have a comprehensive report.
We've heard from Republicans, including House Speaker Paul Ryan, who have come out saying that there's no evidence of fraud.
Right.
Is this a distraction by the president? Is it a waste of taxpayer dollars?
Well, I don't know if it's a waste of taxpayer dollars, but it's certainly a distraction for the president. Look, his number one priority right now should be passing health care reform. The rest of his legislative agenda in many ways hinges on whether or not he can successfully pass health care reform, deliver on his promise to repeal and replace Obamacare. And yet, what's he tweeting about this morning? He's tweeting about the cable TV hosts. He's tweeting about voter fraud. I mean, he's tweeting about Canada's birthday, which is great. But it's a huge distraction from the issue at hand, which is healthcare reform. It's mind-boggling that Donald Trump is not spending every waking moment pushing Congress to do something on healthcare reform, supposedly his number one legislative priority at the moment. It makes no sense to people here in Washington.
And we're seeing shutdowns today. We're reporting in New Jersey, Illinois can't pass a budget. I mean, there's so many other issues around the country as well. But I do want to get your take on, the hosts Mika Brzezinski and Joe Scarborough, who were attacked on Twitter by President Trump. There's some folks who've actually reported the president to Twitter. Do you think that Twitter should take down the president's account for bullying?
No, they should not take down the account of the President of the United States, nor will they take down the account of the President of the United States. Look, you saw a lot of Republicans, including Speaker Ryan, this week criticizing Donald Trump's tweets. That's wholly appropriate. Well, we're reaching a tipping point here where a lot of Republicans just say enough is enough. And if they can't pass their legislative agenda, then what's the point of defending Donald Trump from anything? And it's also just it raises real questions about why his skin is so thinned when it comes to media criticism, and then why he thinks it's productive to turn around and attack these hosts. Look, I've worked for a lot of politicians. It's not unusual for a politician to be thin-skinned to media criticism. It is super unusual for a politician to turn around and tweet about it. It just makes no sense. It's not going to improve the media's coverage of him. It's not going to improve his political standing. It makes no sense from a purely political and strategic perspective.
So when you advise people, Alex, and they have thin skin, what do you tell them to do?
I tell them, look, if you think that the media's treatment of you is unfair, there are ways to deal with it. You can have off-the-record conversations with their editors, with the presidents of networks, with the executive directors of TV shows. There are ways to deal with it without escalating the conflict. Look, Mika and Joe are not going to start treating Donald Trump any better because he's been attacking them on Twitter. So to that sense, it's not productive. It's poor media relations. And in addition to being bad politics, it's also bad media relations. So my advice to candidates when they don't like the media coverage is, look, politics is tough. You're going to get dinged when you run for public office, when you hold public office. Media coverage is going to be criticism by definition. That's what media normally is. They don't write good stories about you. They're going to write tough stories about you. And you just have to have a thick skin if you want to be in the arena. But second of all, if you really feel like it's unfair, there are ways to deal with it without escalating the situation as Donald Trump has this week.
Alex Conant, thank you so much for joining us, Alex.
Thanks. Have a great 4th.
You too.